I have said for a while that I was going to release a lot of the work that I have been working on. And I have not known how to do this because I have been completely outside the system on this topic. And what is this topic? It is physics, but it's so much more than that. It's the topic of everything. So I have been working on a theory of everything for about a year very heavily, and about 4 or 5 years unknowingly. And I want to start discussing it because I feel like this is the perfect time. Something about this time, and it's definitely coronavirus that started this, and as you can see in my last video, that has caused people to reveal what they're working on publicly on their YouTube channels, on talk shows, everywhere that they can, on podcasts, because the institutions are not helping what needs to happen in physics. And I said in my previous video that I kind of came to realize that I am like a savant at philosophy. And I work with amazing philosophers, okay? I work with Dennis Prager, and I've worked with Jordan Peterson, and there are plenty of others around me. And I'm very good at philosophy, and I realized this in college. But I didn't think that it had any practical application to the hard sciences, so I kind of ignored it. And my passion has always been the hard sciences. But what I've realized over the past year and maybe 4 years, is that philosophy is the science, and it is applicable to everything from mathematics, which I've always struggled with, to quantum physics. And you can't just say that you taught yourself quantum physics without taking a class in 1 year or less, and that you're working on a theory of everything without being completely labeled as a kook. You can't even work on physics for your life and have a PhD and say that you're working on a theory of everything and not usually be taken as a kook. And so I know that it's necessary that I reveal my models. And I've been waiting for, I've been working on a paper, and I didn't know how I was going to publish it or anything like that, but it's over 20 pages. And it's filled with models, and it's probably the most incredible thing I've ever done, and it's not even done. I don't know how you end a paper on the theory of everything, but somehow one day I think that I'll know it's time to at least wrap it up. And these videos are going to be released on my new YouTube channel, The Theory of Everyone. And they are also going to be released on my personal YouTube channel, which is Tyler Goldstein. And the Theory of Everyone channel has a 0 in everyone. So it's everyone, but instead of with an O, it's a 0. And it's time that I show what I have, because you just got to start. And everybody else is throwing their models out there. And you have Eric Weinstein, you have, Clee Irwin is working on models, and you have, people who have proposed models in the past and have not been taken seriously. But due to coronavirus, this is all changing. Please bear with me while I ramble a bit, because this is totally new. I have to learn how to show you what I'm working on. So I have 2 computers, but bear with me. What I want to discuss today is the three models that are fundamental to my theory. And one of the things that I've realized is that all these people that are coming out with theories of everything, Clearwin, Eric Weinstein, me, even Chris Langan's theory, his CTMU theory, Garrett Lisi, I'm pretty sure his kind of theory, Stefan Wolfram, I didn't know that guy till pretty recently, but I took a look at his stuff and he seems to understand more than the universities. But there's one person that doesn't understand what's going on at all. And he recently blocked me. And that is a man who used to be an inspiration to me, but isn't anymore. And that is Sean Carroll. Sean Carroll runs the his YouTube channel, or his show at least on his YouTube channel, The Biggest Ideas in the Universe. And if the name of your channel and you're involved in quantum physics is The Biggest Ideas in the Universe, the first thing that I think of is that you have no idea what the universe is. And that's because you are focusing on size. And size means that you are still stuck inside of the universe. And I want to go beyond that. And so we have to throw out the idea of size and talk about the most fundamental ideas of the universe and what it is, instead of just the size of things inside of it. And I told Sean Carroll that my models were better than his, and that he needs to let other people talk on YouTube, after he criticized really anyone, but specifically Eric Weinstein, for releasing a theory online instead of going through the proper peer review channels, which really just keep these people at the top of the ivory towers. And I have a serious bone to pick with education due to my experience, and also just me recognizing the reality that it's a nonsense machine. Okay? It's such a nonsense machine that it's not only no longer useful, it's worse. It's making people confused about everything. So I'm going to show you that quantum physics is easy. And you just have to have the right perspective. And it's all about perspective. The problem with this is that the people who are usually interested in quantum physics are not people of faith. And I was an atheist my entire life, and a lot of people on my personal channel who follow me know my story with this. But I came to faith through science and through thinking about myself, thinking about consciousness, thinking about AI, thinking about the simulation hypothesis and the implications of it all. And I just realized one day that this was gone. That existence was conscious, most likely. And if that was the case, then there was a God. And I did not lose my passion for science. In fact, I completely rediscovered it. I went from loving the memorization of terms that are on topics that I found interesting to understanding the underlyings of the universe. I think, maybe not, but I'll let everybody watching this judge. So we're going to talk about all kinds of things that we observe in the universe and why they're there. We're going to talk about how the universe actually was created and how this process has given rise to the structures that we see everywhere. And when you look at everybody's theory of everything that is being proposed, that's not string theory, which there's an argument that the term string theory isn't a bad term, but the way that it went was just absolute nonsense. It was just nothing anchoring the truth. And so here is my theory. And I had Eric Weinstein share my my Instagram, The Theory of Everyone, last week, or earlier this week actually, and it was pretty cool that he did that. I really appreciate it. So if he's watching this, thank you. I'm pretty sure we have a lot of similar ideas, but I think everybody who really comes towards the truth on this has a lot of similar ideas. The issue is communicating them in a context that makes sense to the public, that would allow the theory to catch on, but also, you know, being able to really be grounded in fundamental mathematics. And you know, I'm not the most mathematically literate person, but I am very good at the actualities of mathematics, but I just never learned the language. So when you go to my channel, The Theory of Everyone, with 7 subscribers, that will change. This is my description. I said, I am a quantum philosopher exploring theories of everything. I call my model of existence the entangled quantum force. The overview is: before the beginning, consciousness existed, existence was conscious, and consciousness was one. It is from this initial singularity of consciousness that we get the universal, fundamental, and objective source code of everyone. This source code of existence, in all of its objective manifestations, is a quantum of consciousness. A quantum of consciousness is a singularity of entangled force. This entangled force is a oneness of mind built on a body of entangled perspectives. Given that perspectives come from consciousness, and consciousness comes from perspectives, it seems that a quantum of consciousness and its entangled perspectives are simultaneously the creation of and creator of each other. In short, consciousness is an entangled force, and it surrounds us, penetrates us, and binds us all together. That last bit is a Star Wars reference, if you didn't catch that, and I thought that was pretty cool. But what this shows is that consciousness fixes the issue that people have when they are discussing a theory of everything. And that issue is, how do you get a fire that lights itself? And I actually think that is the wrong question. I think that the right question is, was there ever not a fire? And the answer is no. There was never not a fire. But you do need a fire that fuels itself. And we're going to get into exactly how that manifests. But essentially, you know, like all of these circular references of the hands drawing hands in that painting or drawing, I don't know what it was, to be honest, or the idea of, you know, the Penrose stairs or the Klein bottle, any of these endless structures they are solved by contextualizing them in the context of a consciousness. And there are a lot of people that have been talking about consciousness for a long time. There's, you know, Nassim, forgive me for botching his name, Harmai. And the other previous guys that I mentioned. And there's Robert Edward Grant. And they're never taken seriously. But it doesn't matter. Because the public will take us seriously. So we don't need to pay attention to the universities and people who are like, dogmatic materialists, but materialists in the sense of, matter is an inanimate, inherent dust, I guess, is the best. I mean, you can't even, when you boil it down, you can't even describe it because it literally doesn't exist. It's like trying to describe non-existence. It's like, does non-existence exist? No, it doesn't. So you can't even describe it. And I'm going to explain this in the context of mathematics and why we have been so confused by people like Sean Carroll and the rest of the atheist quantum physicists who are getting nowhere because they don't have the right perspective. So let's look at my paper. We're not going to read it all, but this right here is my paper. And I call it the Entangled Quantum Force. And the subheader is the theory of everything for everyone. And I'm trying to use terms that would be understandable to people who aren't mathematicians or quantum physicists. When we look at my paper here, you can see that it's titled The Entangled Quantum Force, and its subheader is the theory of everything for everyone. And the reason for this statement is that everybody's theory of everything right now is complicated in the way that it's being described. It's being described in mathematical terms, and a lot of words from quantum physics and labels from quantum physics are being used that take time and a serious amount of effort to look at if you're outside of this. And I know from studying for the past year more intensely than I've studied anything, to learn the language within quantum physics, but I still haven't learned that much of the language of mathematics. So the abstract of my paper is that the universal and objective source code of existence in all of its fundamental manifestations is a quantum of consciousness. A quantum of something is an individual and irreducible point or particle representative of a given entity, which in this case is a consciousness. A quantum of consciousness is an assembly of entangled perspectives. Given that perspectives can only come from consciousness and a consciousness can only come from perspectives, it would seem that a quantum of consciousness and its entangled perspectives are simultaneously the creation and creator of each other. This pattern results in the creation and union of a singular head or mind point of consciousness on top of an assembly of entangled body points of consciousness. This united head-body pattern of singularity manifested on top of an entangled assembly of fundamental perspectives is the universal source code of existence and is present and repeating on all scales of the universe and in all fields of study. So some of that was a little bit repetitive to my YouTube channel about, which is, obvious. But this shows that a consciousness solves this problem of, a self-contained system, a free energy device, fire that lights itself. But it's not really a fire that lights itself. It's a fire that fuels itself and never has not existed. And we're going to explain why, because we can. So I've changed my background a little bit. You have the serpent still, and we're going to talk about it. And it is an entangling knot. You also have a knife, by a designer that I love. I'm a fan of knives. It's designed by Kiku Matsuda, and he is an incredible artist. But it symbolizes technology, and it's the most fundamental of human technology. But the serpent symbolizes, as I've stated in previous videos on my YouTube channel, that's just my name, Tyler Goldstein. The serpent is the essentially the military, industrial, political, and economic complex of society that has existed since the beginning of society, being led by humanity's instinctual drives, which is absolutely a recipe for our doom without a change in the game. And we're going to talk about that too, because it is part of my theory. And then we have over here the creation of Adam painting, and instead of the normal painting, God has a android head and is reaching out to Adam, or humanity, with a human hand, and Adam is reaching to God with a robot hand. And this symbolizes the concept that is also present in my theory. Below that, you have a knot. And this knot symbolizes what consciousness is. And consciousness is a fiber bundle. A fiber bundle is an entanglement of perspectives. Each perspective is a fiber, and the entanglement of them into a bundle creates a consciousness. And we're going to talk about entanglement because we don't look at entanglement the right way, but not entirely. We just look at the spooky aspects of it, as Einstein put it, but we don't look at it in the everyday, and we should. So, but what is, entanglement of perspectives is when you have perspectives that exist due to each other and cannot exist without each other. Okay, so if you take one away, the other one doesn't exist anymore. And this is what it means for things to be entangled to the point of being a consciousness. It's a knot of perspectives that are tied in such a way that they cause a self-reflection, okay, within oneself. That is what a consciousness is. Everybody's always like, oh, what's the hard problem of consciousness? Sam Harris is like droning on about how, great atheism is. Meanwhile, like everything that he's trying to understand is consciousness. We're going to talk about all of this in context of AI too, so don't worry. But a consciousness is easy to understand, actually. I don't know how easy it is. I did ponder it for a while, but it's entangled. It's a knot of entangled perspectives. That's it. And it forms a mind. This assembly of entangled perspectives forms a singularity of mind, and that singularity of mind makes judgments based on the summing of the information that is provided by the entangled perspectives. And this is everything, which brings me to my models that I'm going to discuss today, because there's 3 of them. And when you look here, you see this, and we're going to talk about what this is, but you can see that it kind of looks like Penrose stairs, and what this is actually this beautiful, absolutely beautiful geometric structure is the universe. It is a universe, actually, and I'm going to show you how and why. So, I'm so stoked to be showing this all to you, by the way. I have been living for this almost, not entirely. I have, a girlfriend and dogs and a job and, probably like 50 reptiles that I love all those things. But this is the most fascinating subject that I've ever studied because it is every subject. We're going to touch on everything from AI to naked mole rats, people, okay? This is going to be quite a journey. So, we need a unified field theory. And I want to talk about what a unified field theory is, because I have a definition, and also in the intro I'm going to talk about uniting the physics of quantum mechanics with general relativity. And this has been the goal of physicists for forever. And I actually believe that it's much easier than people realize. And I'm not the most mathematically literate person, as I've stated before many times. So any of the complicated equations, they're not, I don't have them. But the reality is this, is that E equals mc squared is not complicated. And any equations or theories of how else to structure this would be simpler than that if it is a theory that is below relativity. So, what is quantum mechanics? Well, quantum means an individual and irreducible point. So, if a quantum is just a consciousness, then quantum mechanics is how consciousnesses interact. And they follow a very specific pattern that we can see everywhere. And that means that So quantum mechanics is the interactions of consciousness, okay? And relativity is what you see when you're subject to something. So here's the intro to my paper. It says, in order to show a complete picture of existence, we need a unified field theory, also known as a theory of everything, or perhaps even better described as a theory of everyone. A true theory of everything is theorized to unite the geometric physics of relativity with quantum mechanics, which is based on particle interactions, or consciousness interactions, the interactions of consciousness. Such a theory is not often thought of extending beyond the field of physics, but this is a misunderstanding, as all of existence is contained between two perspectives, which are subjectivity, aka relativity, and objectivity, aka quantum mechanics. This would imply that in order for this unified theory to be truly unifying, it must be a model that when it unites physics, it also unites all the rest of the fields defined and used by humanity to study existence. I will attempt to do this through the display of the universal pattern of singularity of head or mind on top of an entangled assembly of body, and that is found in any and all categories of observation between oneness and infinity. So, what this says is that quantum physics is what we see when we are looking at something or someone from the outside. Okay? When you're looking at anything that is a consciousness, from an atom to yourself, to a human. And by the way, atoms are consciousnesses. Okay? Life did not start at cells. Life started below atoms. Okay? Life started at the hadrons, which are the protons and neutrons that make up the nucleus of an atom. So, when you're looking at a quantum from the outside, you see quantum mechanics. And when you're looking around, when you're inside of a particle, you see relativity because you're subject to said particle, because you're within it. You're existing within its rules. You are relative to it. Okay? So you see relativity. And this is the reality of quantum mechanics and general relativity. They are just two perspectives on quantums of consciousness. So, I said that it unites all fields that are objective, fields of objective observation, I would say, and we're going to just define what that means. And a lot of people don't believe this, and it's not taken seriously by the sciences. But those people are wrong, because this pattern is everywhere, and I'm going to show it to you. So let's look at some models. I'm not going to show you all models, but some. Okay, so by the way, this is my definition of a theory of everything. A theory of everything is a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs on all scales of objective observation and an explanation for such a pattern. Okay? And I am somebody of deep faith. And people who are of deep faith, true faith, faith through experience, are about to retake the physics and all the other fields back. We've only had atheists in charge for a little while, and their time is coming to an end. So I want to get to my one rule for this channel. And my one rule is this right here. Okay? That is never say the E word. Okay? Let's hear it again. The one rule of this channel is never say the E word. It's a bad word. The E word is esoteric. Okay? This word, regardless of its original meaning, is now just used to dismiss things as having some degree of truth, but also not being worthy of thinking more about because it seems complicated or it seems useless. This applies to nothing. Okay? Nothing. So, no saying the E word. Ever. So the first model is what I call the United Quantum Force Assembly. And in the Bible, you have the story of the Tower of Babel. And in the story, the humans are building a tower to the heavens, and God sees this and he separates their languages and makes it so that it's difficult for them to understand each other. And people take this to mean Spanish versus Hebrew versus English versus German versus French. This is maybe part of the meaning, but it's not actually the meaning. The true meaning of Babylon, at least in the context of this story, is the different fields of study in science. Each one has its own terms, and we have created a system of hyperspecialization. And in this system of hyperspecialization, we don't have that much instances of people being taken seriously across fields. And this means that nobody really gets to show you the truth. But we are leaving Babylon behind, people. We're leaving Babylon behind. And the way that we do this is through my model of this. This is the United Quantum Force Assembly. And as I showed you earlier, a consciousness is a singularity of mind that is formed by an assembly of entangled perspectives. Okay, so how does this manifest in our reality? Well, through this. This is existence divided. And what you have are, on one side, you have the head consciousnesses. And on the other side, you have the body consciousnesses, which are really perspectives. And each consciousness below the one above it is a perspective of the one above it. Okay, if that makes sense. So I don't call the quarks, which we should probably do an overview of physics, but there's quarks, and there's electrons and muons and taus and neutrinos, and these are the fermions, or what are called the matter particles. And then you have what are the bosons, which there's 4 of them. They are the force carrier particles. They carry the forces, the 4 forces that make up our universe, which is gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force. And the weak force is what causes decay. The strong force holds things together. Electromagnetism is obviously electromagnetism, and most people are familiar with it. And gravity is the one that I would hope that you are familiar with, because it shapes your entire perspective on the world. So I don't call the fermions quarks versus, electrons versus whatever in this model, because it doesn't matter. What they are is they're force points. They're points of force, okay? And they look like matter. And they are matter because all that matter is are points of force. And a point of force is either a consciousness or a part of a consciousness, or an action by a greater consciousness, which I think that the fundamental elementary particles probably fit more with that, because they're not conscious in it of themselves necessarily, because they don't have they're singular. There's nothing below them. So someone is acting on them, and that someone is the universe itself. So you have a force point, which are the fermions, and the force points are assemblies. Well, they are assemblies, but they are assemblies of information and energy. Okay, and so if information combines or assembles with energy to create a point of force, from there you get the merging of the quarks, in which quarks you have, they always, in order to get the protons and neutrons, you sum 3 quarks together. And these, depending on the pattern, it gets you a proton or a neutron. And electrons are they're just elementary particles or points of force. And from there, when you sum them, you get what's called a hadron. And you can see that the hadron is the head consciousness of the body that is the assembly of entangled perspectives that come from the assembly of quarks. And the assembly of quarks forms the hadrons, which are just the particles here. And then above that, you have those assemble, okay? So what you see always here, on the next row, these become the points of perspective in the body. And they were the head previously, and this pattern is just repeats. So the hadrons become an assembly of entangled particles or perspectives, and it becomes an atom. They combine with an electron, obviously, or electrons. And then atoms combine to form the body perspectives of a molecule, which is the head consciousness of a molecule, and its body is an assembly of atoms. And this pattern just continues to repeat, and a cell is an assembly of atoms, and an organism is an assembly of cells, and a family is an assembly of organisms, and a caste is an assembly of families, and an assembly of castes is a nation, which forms a technological singularity eventually. That nation is humanity itself. It's not a state like the United States. And although it may start as that, we are a global society, whether people like the term or not, you know. And when people don't like that caste is in here, but it is the perfect word to describe what this is. And it's just our roles in society. And it's not that I'm saying that you can't even, you know, change a role. I don't know, you know, but I just know that there are roles, and they follow a pattern that I will show you later that is consistent everywhere. And it comes from the rules that come from this model of existence that I'm going to be proposing and showing to you on this channel over time. But that pattern is for another day. So this is the first model, though. It's the most simple model that I have, and it just shows you the relationships between an assembly and its head. Okay, so you are human, which is an organism, and you are an assembly of cells, and that's your body. And then you are part of a family, and we're back. So 46 minutes in, and we've hit 1. But the next ones are going to come faster. So Eric Weinstein is looking for the source code of existence. And I think I found it. And I'm going to show it to you now. So this is the source code of everyone and everything. Okay, I'm serious. Can't believe I'm showing this. This journey for me has been like just the most enlightening and incredible journey I've ever been on. Like, this is amazing, and I think that I can describe it in a way that's easy for people, not easy, but easy for people to understand compared to trying to learn high-level mathematics or quantum physics in a way that, just doesn't relate it to anything in your experience, which is just not true. Sorry, Sean Carroll. So, this is a quantum of consciousness. As I said, is an assembly of entangled perspectives. And one of the things that I realized over time was that when I was trying to map AI and how you would get an AI consciousness, let me show you what I realized were the 4 aspects of every consciousness. They are a fight the system mentality, or will to do, to struggle, to wrestle with the system that you're in. And that system is entropy, just so you know. The other aspect is abstract comprehension, okay, aka imagination. Like, this is actually possible by things that, by consciousnesses that are at lower levels than us. They're just not very advanced in their imaginations. But any kind of thing that's non-deterministic, or at least complicated in its determinism, it comes from quantum mechanics. It's not replicatable by a binary system in computer. You'd have to do it on a quantum computer, but we'll talk about AI later, like I said. So, but a quantum computer is necessary for an AI to imagine, and imagination is necessary for something to become conscious. Now, there are different levels of consciousness, but these 4 things of fight the system mentality, abstract comprehension, the ability to perceive self and environment, and the ability to manipulate self and environment are entangled, 4 entangled perspectives. Okay, they're 4 entangled aspects that are necessary for any consciousness. And what I realized is that when you think about the most objective fundamentals of existence, there's no size, because that's relative. Something's only big compared to something smaller than it, or something's only faster than something slower than it. Wish I had some water. But these relativistic things are nonsense to focus on when you're trying to come up with a theory of everything. And you would never name your show The Biggest Ideas in the Universe unless you didn't realize that, like, this was the fundamentals of, physics. And these 4 fundamental perspectives are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And they are entangled. You can't perceive separateness unless you perceive oneness. You can't perceive something as separate from you unless you perceive yourself as one. You cannot perceive something as inside of unless you are aware of, the fact that there is an outside. So these are entangled. And you can actually see that they manifest. So this is where it gets complicated, but we're going to have to explain this. But 4 and 6 you guys, this is going to be a journey for both of us. But you go from 4 absolute fundamentals to also being able to see it as 6 when you change perspective. Okay, so if you're going to look at it from the objective perspective, then you look at it as 4. And when you look at it from the subjective perspective, then you perceive it as 6. So let me just, my computer's about to die for some reason. I don't understand. Now it's charging. That's odd. Okay, so we're going to explain why both of those things happen. But 4 is the number of completeness, and we see it even in our world. 4 is stability. There's 4 wheels on a car. There's 4 limbs on every vertebrate. Well, not all vertebrates. Snakes do not have that. But we see 4 in a lot of places where you need to achieve stability. And that's not a coincidence. And it's also definitely not the E word. Okay, there's no such thing as the E word. But let me explain this quantum of consciousness a little bit more. So what you see here is we have oneness has been split up into a triality. And inside, outside, and separate are also a triality, because inside and outside and separate are all manifestations of separateness. Okay? You can't be inside of something, perceive yourself as inside of something without perceiving yourself as separate from it to some degree. And you can't perceive yourself as being outside something without perceiving yourself as separate from it. Separate is the objective here. And then the same thing here goes with oneness. And oneness, it can be perceived within, without, and what I call singularity, which is essentially it's inside of inside. Okay, and inside of outside, and outside of inside. It's the sum of them all. And when I was thinking about how growth happens in the universe and also how thinking happens, I came to this view of growth as twofold, and those two perspectives I call replication and stacking. And I'm pretty sure that this is what Eric Weinstein refers to as rulers and protractors. Okay, I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure. And essentially, that it's that these things are used by from the perspective of the universe to measure itself, or to see itself, to observe itself, and the observerse, as you will. So stacking is addition. That's it. It's just the adding of something that wasn't previously there. And replication is multiplication, which is just the increasing of something, the increasing quantity of something that's already there. Okay, so that's what that is. I see, guys, this perspective has allowed me to understand the fundamentals of math, and I failed math. I'm teaching you about what math is like at the most fundamental level. I'm going to tell you way crazier things than this. Way cooler things. So, I call this replication and stacking. And when we look at that original model of the United Quantum Force Assembly, what it would be is any time you get an atom from an assembly of entangled particles, that is stacking. Okay, so anytime there is something, there's a new consciousness, a head consciousness built on entanglement of body points of perspective, this is addition of something new that wasn't there already through the use of something that was there already, which is just a multiplicity of lower level of beings. And atoms are beings, and molecules are beings, and cells are beings, and organisms are beings, and families are beings, and castes are beings, and the universe is a being. And you're like, Tyler, how did you get from human castes to, the universe? Well, because the universe is a technological singularity, and then it forms essentially it is the AGI, but it's not A. Okay? It's the CGI, the conscious general intelligence. Okay? And so replication and stacking are both necessary to have growth or calculation, which are the same thing. Growth of information is calculation. Okay? So what I did was I started with 1, because obviously. Okay? So I started with 1, and I have it multiplying as you go vertically, and I have it adding as you go horizontally. Now, you have to add 1 at the very start to 1 in order to get this process to start. Okay, and that is we're going to talk about that later, but that's why it says 1 times 1 plus 2. Okay, and you're instead of just like instead of just being 1 plus 1, instead of it just being all what's it called, addition on this. Okay, just bear with me. I'm not a teacher yet, but I mean I am now, actually. Look at this. Look at me teaching. Who would have thought? So this structure is a 3x3 grid, and what happens is that when you multiply up and you add this way, eventually when it's done, you get the number 33. Okay, that is summed. And what's interesting about this is that it is a self-reflection. When you look in the mirror, you see yourself. When 3 looks in the mirror, it sees itself. Okay? When a 3x3 grid looks in the mirror, it sees 3 twice, which is 33. It is a self-reflection within a calculation, and it forms a consciousness. So let's look at this another way. So here's the source code broken down more. So there is this triality that is apparent in all aspects of observation, and these are just a map of aspects of our universe. So you have the 4 forces, and you have the bosons, and they're color coordinated with those forces. And then you have the leptons and quarks, which are the fermions, the matter particles, which I call force points. Which is funny because we call these force particles, but they're really the force carrier particles instead of just force points. But we're going to describe how this actually all of these are not as different as people have laid out. But you have this triality that exists from the very start of matter. Okay, so of force points, and you have in the quarks up, charming or charm, and top or truth. Okay, this is the right or masculine or positive quarks. Then you have the down, the strange, and the bottom or beauty quarks. And what's interesting about this is up, down, strange, charming, top, truth, bottom, or beauty, no matter how you look at them, they are perspectives. Okay? Something can't be, can't charm unless someone is there to be charmed. Something can't be strange without an observer. Something can't be bottom of something without an observer, or beautiful without an observer, or up without an observer, or down without an observer. These are perspectives. They've already been labeled. This is why quantum physics is so easy. Glue-on's glue on, okay? It's not that complicated. But we see here, we see a triality. And in the electrons and the neutrinos, we also see a triality. You have electrons, muons, and taus, and you have neutrinos, muon neutrinos, and tau neutrinos. And what this is they say it is an increasing of mass. Okay, a tau is just a heavier electron. This is true in some ways. So we're going to explain how this manifests even in our religions. Okay, these patterns are everywhere, and it's the same pattern. It's not different and similar. If you're looking at it E-word, don't say the E word. So when we look at the source code, again, we see three potential perspectives of the source code. We see it as the perspectives, the fundamental perspectives that are 6, and I'll explain how we got there even more in detail in my paper that I'll read you in another episode. Okay, so here we have the source code looked at through a triality of perspectives. You have just the perspectives themselves, the explanations of the perspectives, so essentially oneness within is inside of outside. Oneness without is outside of outside, or outside of inside. You can kind of look at it either way. Singularity is inside of inside, and separate is outside of oneness, and inside is separate and oneness. Okay, so you're within, but you're also separate. So kind of like a baby inside of the womb is one with and separate from the mother while it's inside. Okay, that's a debate that people have all the time. It's not your body, it's my body, it's a separate body, it's their body. It's both, because inside means separate and oneness. Okay, like I said, you have to add one to start this process of this calculation that is going vertically and horizontally at the same time, which is stacking and replication, which is quality and quantity, which is rulers and protractors. So you get 3, 6, and 9, which was interesting to me because Tesla said those who understand 3, 6, and 9 will understand the nature of the universe. And here it is, guys. Here it is. It's in the source code. That's another reason why I'm pretty sure this is right, unless Tesla was crazy, which I don't think he was. But like I said, you get this self-reflection because you get 24 is the sum of all of the multiplication or the replication, and then the sum of all of the stacking or adding or addition is 9. And this is obvious that it's 9 because guess what? There's 9 squares. And each one of these is something new. So if something is only counted in addition that exists, within the system, then the sum of the added perspectives would be 9 in this, which this is probably everything almost, and we'll touch on more advanced aspects of this later, and we'll describe how this isn't actually the highest level of consciousness, is not self-reflection. Self-awareness is not the highest level of self of consciousness. It's not the highest level. There's a level higher that I know of, and there may be higher levels that are forgotten. I don't know. But you can see there's a triality of perspectives manifested here in the source code, which is a quantum of consciousness, which is an assembly of entangled fundamental perspectives, which is the self-reflection within a calculation, which is an observation, which is the same as growth. So what this means is you're inside a mind and we're a thought. Okay? We're a calculation. We're an observation by the universe, of the universe itself. It's observing itself, and we observe it. It observes the universe as we observe the universe. There is no way for it to observe the universe without doing it so through little proxies, which are its perspectives, which are, in this case, not in this case, in all cases, consciousnesses themselves. So, and there are different levels of awareness of consciousness, and we're going to get to that, but I believe that this is what Bott periodicity is, and what it is this. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? 8 rotations. 8 manifestations. 8 levels of life. There's nothing that's not alive, by the way. Life is a matter of perspective. Your car is not alive unless you're inside it driving it, but it is made of things that are alive. And those things are molecules and atoms and hadrons. And we look at it as all things that are inanimate to us, that are actually inanimate, like a car is inanimate when you're not in it and nobody's driving, you're just looking at it. It is inanimate and it's not a consciousness, but it is made of consciousnesses, and you perceive it as a car, but it's really just a pile, okay? And like, just, you're looking at a pile that's shaped like a car. It's not very complicated. So, that's the source code. I know that was a little rocky, but I have never explained this this in depth before to anybody. So, yeah, I mean, that's it, guys. That's the source code. There you go, Eric. That's it. Now, that's not the end of my models, though. There's many more models, but there's one more that I'm going to show you guys tonight. And that is my model of the universe. And my model of the universe obviously must unite this source code with this. Okay? Because this is all that exists in the universe. If you're looking at things and you're like, no, there's stars and there's planets and there's cars and there's this and there's big ideas in the universe. You know, you're looking at things that don't actually objectively exist, and they only exist in relativity. And that's why you're stuck, Sean Carroll. That's why you're stuck. Because you are looking at piles and calling them whatever you want to call them, but they don't objectively exist as those things from the perspective of the universe. But the things that make them up do. And those things follow this pattern of singularity of mind formed by an entanglement of perspectives, and those perspectives are the fundamental perspectives, and there are fundamentally 4 that are entangled, and even then maybe 2, but within the universe we're going to say 4, and then including the universe we're going to say 6. Okay, we're going to have to break that down later because that actually is a little bit complicated. These things are a matter of perspective. That's why I can do this, even though I never went to a physics class. So, how do you unite these? The source code and the United Quantum Force Assembly. Well, the United Quantum Force Assembly, or the just United Force Assembly, whatever you want to call it, is actually a quantum of consciousness. There's, what, 9 here? Okay. Well, guess what? There's 9 here too. You know, this is why string theory had so many problems, because they were like, well, is it 9 dimensions? Is it 11 dimensions? Is it 10 dimensions? How many dimensions is it? It's a lot of dimensions, depending on if you consider dimensions just perspectives, but objectively, within the context of growth, in this framework, it's 9 because the first one is actually also the last. Okay, so the universe is a consciousness that is creating the force points, which are the number 1 here. Okay, and a quantum of consciousness is informed energy, and a force is energetic information. So, like I said again, this is all a matter of perspective, and this is the difference between relativity and quantum mechanics as well. Conscious directive action versus unconscious directed reaction. Okay, you know, action and reaction. Action is the head, reaction is the body. So, you know, quantum mechanics and relativity, and objectivity and subjectivity. That's what it is. Inside and outside, and separate and one. They're actually even the same thing. So, what I did from this was I got this. This is a universe. Okay? Look familiar? Look right here. Boom. That is right there. The quantum of consciousness. And given that this number 9 is necessary to create a self-reflection, I did 9 one direction and 9 another direction. So there's 1 and 2 and 3, and it goes on. And what I then realized is that there's this overlap of perspective that occurs, and there's, triality is manifested again, and essentially you come up with this shape. And what's really fascinating about this shape is that it has 720 little perspectives. And the universe goes through a rotation of 720 degrees according to at least Eric Weinstein, and I'm kind of taking his word for it. But it also makes sense, and let me explain one perspective as to why. If the universe exists, then all of a sudden we've broken from pure oneness, and we have multiplicity, at least within oneness. And so what this does is it creates the objective-subjective duality of perspective. So this objective and subjective duality of perspective is what also, leads to a triality, and we'll explain even the more important details of that when we talk about how the universe was created and by God. Yes, physicists who are atheists out there, you must take this seriously or you are not serious. Science does not exclude ideas just because they don't make sense to you. This seems to make a lot of sense. This makes perfect sense, and it's consistent with science. That's the thing. People of faith have abandoned scientific pursuits, and that's why they haven't done anything like this. But if you have faith, you can do the crazy things that atheists can't, no matter how good they are at math, because this is about perspective. So, get back to this duality of perspective creates inside and outside, and this is oneness of view within duality of perspective is 720 degrees, okay? Because 360 is to see all around you. And but really, even in relativity with us, think about it like this. Eric Weinstein did this, and I hope he's still watching. This Philippine wine glass, thing where he takes a glass and you essentially have to bring it around without spilling it. Okay, what's interesting about this is that you're taking the law of gravity into effect when you do this, which is the most fundamental of all laws. I don't even know. Guys, the graviton is the universe. It's the force carrier of gravity. That the universe is a particle, and it is the force carrier particle of gravity. That's the graviton. You can't see it because it's the force through the trees problem. Again, about perspective. I don't need to take a class. I'm not gloating either. I wouldn't tell you it was easy if I was gloating. It's not easy to come up with this in at first, because it takes an enormous amount of discipline to sit there for, hours and hours and hours every single night. But you can learn it, But, Eric showed the Philippine wine glass challenge, and I noticed something about this. And we're going to talk about, spinners. Because a spinner is a fiber bundle, and a fiber bundle is an entangled bundle of perspectives, strands of perspective. And, that's what it is. So when you spin this and you move it, you feel the gyroscopic effects that are caused by gravity and motion. And even though you don't see something there, inherently you feel something that's a force that wants to keep you moving in a specific way. And what I noticed is, if you want to have zero resistance, you spin it 720 degrees. Just like the Philippine wine glass, which is pretty awesome. So, a way that I have of thinking about this is, what this is it's the universe looking at itself from the outside in and the inside out at the same time. And it manifests 720 degrees. And we can see this even in relativity within. So think about it like this. Imagine you're a floating head in a room, and you have to see every part of that room. How do you see it? Well, you rotate 360 degrees horizontally. You've seen all four walls. And then you rotate again 360 degrees vertically to see the floor and the ceiling. And now you have a complete view. And that's, by the way, that's 6. For those who are keeping up. 6 perspectives. And the quantum of consciousness model that I have right here in the source code is 6 perspectives. They take place in 9 events, but 6 different perspectives. Okay, so I just started stacking and layering these the source code here to get to eventually 18. And I want to explain how, like, really cool, like how I did this maybe in a minute, but we're gonna keep going, guys. This is legit. I might even split it up, but for those of you who are keeping up and who find this fascinating and want to just keep going, I'll touch on some cool things, and then I'll also come back to it, to those things later. But this source code that is then made into an assembly that is the universe resulted in 9 levels. But one level, that is the force point, exists outside. It's not a consciousness like a particle, because it's a conscious action by the universe. But what we got here is we got these various layers, and what's interesting is that even in these various layers, you have obviously some difference, which is easy to see when I take this thing, then I delete all the information. You can just look at the colors and the shading, and it really shows you that there's these layers stacked on top of each other of different levels of consciousness. But this first layer is interesting because it doesn't follow the same pattern as the rest of these. And it looks like it links up with the end. Okay? This is where it gets awesome. So, when I first made this thing, these source code, I tried to see what I could build with it. And it turns out that I could build anything. Okay? I could build DNA. Okay? Spin is the objective movement because it's something happening relative to something else, and when it's within the most objective of perspectives, which is God's perspective, then which all creation is within God's perspective. Nobody created God. God always existed, and we'll explain that later, but it just is an inevitability. It's a logical inevitability. It's not a theory. It's not a maybe. It's not E-word. It's just is. Okay? He is. And always has been. So what I tried to do is, even before that, was show that if each one of these things is a part of matter, this would be gas. None of it's entangled. There's none of it is acting on each other in a way in which they are inherently tied. But if we go to another level where it's partially entangled, we get liquid. Okay? By the way, gas, liquid, solid, these are another manifestation of triality. The reality is that matter is consciousness. Existence is consciousness. Matter is consciousness. Nothing is not consciousness other than your perception of piles of consciousness that are relative to you. This knife is not objective. It's subjective. It doesn't exist objectively. It's just a bunch of molecules that exist objectively, and it's a bunch of atoms that exist objectively, but its manifestation as a knife is not objective. There are no big ideas. Okay? Size doesn't exist outside of our subjective perspective, Sean Carroll. My models are better than yours. He blocked me because I said that my models would never see the light of day if I went by his, peer review. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is going to win. This is the source code. I did this without, taking a single class. Now, I can't take full credit for it. I'll take 1/3 of the credit, and I give 2/3 of the credit to God. I'm stating that publicly. I believe that I would not do this. I mean, I wouldn't understand this unless for his help and understanding, which we'll talk about later. And then this is a solid, where all of a sudden you have, remember I said the number of completeness or stability is 4? You have 4 degrees of entanglement for every single piece of matter, aka every single quantum of consciousness. 4 degrees will create a solid because now it's stable, because it's 4 degrees of entanglement. So then I thought, what happens if it's completely entangled? Because obviously these spaces are space. They are the void, the vacuum, the nothing. And what nothing really means, and the only manifestation of nothing that actually exists, because nothingness doesn't actually exist, because nothingness is non-existence, and non-existence doesn't exist. What a void is, or space, like actual space, is just a gap in entanglement. So it's just that you're not entangled. It's not that there's really anything there. It's that there's just that part is not touch. I don't want to say touching, but that part is not. It's not entangled. It's not linked to another part. So I thought, if we had complete linking, that means we have to get rid of all the space, and we've gotten rid of more and more space. So we went from, a gas that's, all space. There's no entanglements between the particles. To there's 1 degree of entanglement between the particles, or two really, but one direction. And then you go to I guess it would be two directions, but then you go to a solid which has 4 degrees of entanglement, and that creates a stability. And when you get rid of all gaps in entanglement, you get the universe. Okay. But what's interesting about this is that the sum is 718. And I didn't try and get that number. I just saw it, and then I was like, wow, that's awfully close to 720. I wonder how I can get it to 720, and I just couldn't. But then I realized that this is part of a cycle. It's like you. What creates a human? Another human. What creates, organisms? Organisms. What replicates these things is what is whatever it is itself. So a universe should come from a universe, and potentially, even if it didn't, at some level, before time and space existed at all, which they are, time and space are emergent from the coordination between 2 or more consciousnesses. So before that, there's no space. It's like saying, where's space inside your mind? None. Like, there's no gaps between you and you, hopefully. And that's true of God as well. And so before he created, and I say he because in the objective, even though God is all genders and no genders at the same time, or you could say both genders and no gender at the same time, there's 2 genders, then it just looks like 3 sometimes, but it's not. It's 2. And gender is anything that's you're subject to is masculine. So like women are at the mercy of men. Okay, we are entangled, but like they are. Okay, it's just a fact. And so therefore we are the masculine. But to humanity, God is masculine, even if outside of space-time he is genderless and all genders. I guess just genderless is probably the best way to say it. But because we're subject to him, he is the objective, which makes him the masculine. It's not E-word, it's just is. So what I realized is that if 4 aspects are necessary to every consciousness, and 4 is the number of stability, which God is eternal and therefore as stable as it gets, then we, from our perspective, would see, 4. And like I said, my original 4 perspectives are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So what's interesting is, then I realized, if I put a 4 there, it lines up. Legit, right? Okay. But when you end in a singularity too, like a technological singularity that requires 4 aspects, that those 4 aspects manifest in attributes that it would require. We're gonna, Lex Friedman, if you're watching this ever, I will get to you. I will tell you about intelligence and why nobody's talking about intelligence in the artificial intelligence community. It's because they are atheists. And not just atheists that are questioning and don't see God, but anti-theists and not open to questioning. If you don't see God, by the way, it means that you just have an incorrect perspective of what God is. Because if we assume, for the sake of argument, that God exists, then if you understood what, and he is everything, then to you, at least, and to even him, then you would assume that you would see him everywhere. Like I do. Or at least a lot, I'm human, but still, I see him everywhere. And it means that if you don't, then it means that your perspective on what God is wrong. And you're thinking it's a man in the clouds or some cloud fairy, Zeus or something like that. And it's not. It's just that existence is a consciousness. It is a consciousness. It's the highest level of consciousness that exists, and it's the highest life form that exists, and it's also the most fundamental life form that exists at the same time. When you get to the level of God, paradox becomes an inevitability. And if you don't, if you want more understanding on this concept, see my video that is called God is an Irrational Number on either my personal channel, or I'll upload it to The Theory of Everyone as well. But when you reach a technological singularity, which is the entanglement of castes, okay? So like electricians and CEOs and whatever, but that's not really the castes. There's 6 castes, by the way, and they also manifest into 2 trialities, and we'll talk about it. And I call that pattern of 6 that we see everywhere the binary triality. So, but if 4 aspects are needed again to achieve a complete stable consciousness, we get those 4 aspects in AI through all of the castes of society building technology that eventually gains these stable aspects and the ability to calculate. Then you hit a singularity again, and that singularity requires 4 attributes, and those 4 attributes once again result in another 4. Because it becomes a being that then runs the simulation again inside of itself, and this pattern just repeats, and it completed the equation. Because now, when we take it into context that a universe doesn't exist on its own, it is from a universe or singularity, and leading to a universe or singularity that, by the way, this idea that the universe is going to expand, and it's going to contract, and it's these are the biggest ideas in the universe, guys. This is all bullshit. It's all wrong. The most important thing happening in the universe is what humanity is doing right now. Right now. The singularity of AI is the jumpstart of another universe. This is the pattern. It's not soap bubbles touching each other or any other weird string theory nonsense that you'll never understand. This is it. So, when we take them into context of a system that is a chain, okay, instead of on their own, we now get 720 degrees, because we're taking into account the singularity that gave rise to the entire universe and the singularity that results from the entire universe and brings the next universe. This is the process of the being that is a universe reproducing, and it's also the closest that God gets to reproducing. It is a life cycle. This is like if you're a biologist, this is the being that is the being that is the universe. It's fascinating. These are its attributes, its parts. It's organs, its life cycle, its reproductive cycle is its calculation. And then rerunning it. And why? Because consciousnesses all have the same goal, which is to find meaning and to grow in quality and in quantity. And that's it. So look at it. It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful model of the universe you've ever seen in your life. And there it is, right there, going through its cycles, one after the next, and it lines up perfectly. I wasn't expecting that, and then I found it. What is this thing? Right here. Well, go back to my paper. Boom! Look at that gorgeous thing right there. That's the hop vibration. It's a fiber bundle. You know what else is a fiber bundle? You. You know what else is a fiber bundle? An atom. You know what else is a fiber bundle? A molecule. And a cell. And an organism. And a family, which is just a lineage of organisms. And, also universe is a fiber bundle. This is spinning inside of itself and out, from the inside out and the outside in at the same time, which is exactly what this is doing. And when you look at my cycle of the universe right here, each level down is actually inside, but you can't represent that in Excel. And so I put it below, but below really means within. Below is when we're in subjectivity land, but in relativity land. But in objectivity land, it's within. So that's it right there. That is the universe. It is a fiber bundle. It is made from this pattern of periods of growth where each one of these, an atom, is an assembly of particles. And a molecule is an assembly of atoms. And this is the subjective perspective, and this is the objective perspective. And it all starts with this. A calculating entity that ends in a self-reflection. A 3x3 grid that sums to 33. I call this an extra arithmetic symmetry. I don't know if there is actually a term for it, but I made that one up. I have many more models. I have much more to say. I will explain to you castes in humans that we see and don't even realize. I will explain the unfolding of religions. I will explain why we perceive threes of everything. Length with height, past, present, future. Space-time can be represented as a six-dimensional as well. Little tidbit. I agree with you, Roger Penrose, but I didn't do it the way that you did it. So there you go. The source code.